Alder Moore.
Here.
Alder Kitzlar.
Here.
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Coor.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the May 6th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections, additions? I had let me just find it here. On page 8, right above appointments, where I reported on the work had begun on the capital budget, it says I wanted these reviewed by committees by July 1st. I think it should be July 31st.
Okay. Got it.
All right. Other than that, anything else? Alder Thomas?
Under new business, the first paragraph, like 5 pages down, it talks about the fines. It's $1. It's $500 for the third offense, third and subsequent.
Oh.
For police, it was this. I think so. But it should not say the 6th offense, it should say 3rd offense?
Third and subsequent offenses.
Okay.
Alder Groupie?
On page 2, under unfinished business, it's talking about Alder Moore's opinions on the foster portion of the paid family leave amendment. But then it says she withdrew her surrogacy amendment, and that was mine. So I just want to make sure that that is accurately stated.
Okay.
Anything else?
Oh, you withdrew your foster care?
That is correct in the second sentence, but later it says sometimes fostering is required prior to adoption. She withdrew her surrogacy amendment in hopes that it will be covered in the family care policy. So that is
Got it.
mine.
Thank you.
Anything else? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item is appearances, and tonight we have Dane County Executive Joe Parisi and Dane County Supervisor Tanya Buckingham, who are going to give us an update on the lake level situation and what the county is proposing to do to help make things better. So if you two want to come up and do whatever you're going to do.
Well, it's exciting. It's exciting. We've done this twice in less than a week, right? So I'm just going to go over the process that the Lake Level Task Force followed a little bit, and then the county executive will come up and talk about the next steps and how those recommendations will be put into place. So first of all, we had we were scheduled to have 6 meetings. We actually got done in 5. So we went through a report that was put together by a technical working group, and you can find this online, and I recommend that you take a look at it. We learned a lot about how to read all of these charts. I don't know, has John Reimer been in at all to talk about this?
No.
No? Okay. He's addressed the community several times.
He
throughout this
spoke at a
process.
meeting we had at the Lucier Center back
Right.
shortly after Thanksgiving, but that's the only time.
Right. So we learned a lot about the philosophy of how the lakes are managed, really about sharing the burden across the whole system rather than focusing on an individual lake. And this report was put together by several experts, university folks, county staff, some folks with the DNR, and then our task force came together and had these meetings to go over the report. So we had a couple of meetings where it was really about digging into the science behind what was done and looking at those recommendations and evaluating what the best next steps might be. One of the other pieces of information that I recommend you take a look at is there's the Dane County Lake Level Management Guide for the chain of lakes, also online. And again, it just shares the philosophy about how the lakes are managed and all of the different considerations. It's extremely complicated, as you might imagine, to deal with all of the different things and variables of these 4 major lakes and then all of the other components to it. So through the whole process, there were 6 scenarios in this report that were modeled for us. And if you go through it, one thing, it might seem rather extreme, some of the examples that are given there. So, the first one was to lower Lake Mendota by 1 foot. That seems really extreme. So this was a big question that we talked about quite a lot. And part of that was just to see how it would show up in the models, right? So if we did this really extreme event, what does that look like and what kind of impact does that have on the chain of lakes? And then we can sort of walk it back from there. But that way, when you're looking at these charts, I think you saw them, they're just like a couple inches by a couple inches. If you really want to see the impact you're going to have with something, you need to look at kind of the strongest scenario you might run. So that was the first one. The second one was to manage the lakes at the 100-year water level. The third was to remove all dams. Those are all the adaptation scenarios. And then the remaining 3 mitigation scenarios were bridge modification, Yahara dredging, and flow rerouting and pumping. And you'll see when you take a look at that report, you can see the impact of those, really the strongest being with the dredging and the flow rerouting. And the county exec will go over what the first steps will be with that. But as a result, we had a series of recommendations, which you can also find. I have this posted from my blog. But you can see all of the options for that, and we have short and long-term goals for each of those options. And it also includes, other than those 3 scenarios, aquatic plant harvesting, continuing conversation with county staff. So this has already happened. The first report has already been given to the committee that oversees lake levels, and that will continue. There's a requirement of 4 updates throughout the year, and that will all continue so that we have good communication now that the task force is no longer meeting. And I don't know, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks. Good evening. Thanks for allowing us to come in for a few minutes to give you a quick update. And I want to thank Supervisor Buckingham for definitely hitting the ground running in her role as supervisor. And she is following what I've noticed as kind of a trend in local Monona officials in working extremely hard and being very diligent. So it's great to have her on the county board. So I thought I'd give a quick background. A lot of this we already know, but before I talk about what we're going to be doing here, as we know, the challenges of flooding are feeling more and more imminent. We're certainly experiencing rain events at a rate that we haven't in the past. Not only more events, increasing events, but greater quantities of rain coming down. A few years back, the county partnered with the university, and we asked them to do some modeling on how climate change would impact us locally. We're aware of how it's impacting us globally, but locally, we're all responsible for the safety and well-being of folks here. So we asked them to do some modeling for us. And basically what the modeling showed was what we saw, very similar to what we saw last year and that we're seeing this spring, that we're going to have more frequent rain events, particularly in the spring and the early summer. And not only will they be more frequent, but they'll be heavier all at once and longer in duration. So we'll see rains like we saw last year, the 15 inches in one event, followed by weeks and weeks of rain. So when you combine that with the fact that our community is very, very quickly growing. In my lifetime, Dane County's population has doubled. And we live in a place that is built on a lot of filled-in wetlands with a lot of impervious surface and with a storm sewer system that is designed to take every drop of rain that hits and put it into our lakes as quickly as possible. And that's what all of us in this room inherited. So when we look at what happened last year, there are a couple of things that really stand out when we look at our ability to manage this new reality. There's the lake level conversation, but in a way the lake level conversation is kind of moot if we can't manage the lakes at whatever level the DNR decides is best for them to be managed at. For example, Lake Mendota, long before the rains, a year before the rains last year, all of the floodgates were open throughout the system, and we could not get Lake Mendota down even to what's considered the summer minimum. And the reason being is, in addition to the increased rains, it's all of the areas that you see there along the chain of lakes highlighted are areas where the flow backs up and the flow slows down. And the reason being is years and years and decades of sediment buildup. So what the technical group did, what the committee did, and what our staff have been working on is looking at these areas to look how we can increase the flow of water through the chain of lakes. Right now, 2 inches that goes into Lake Mendota takes 2 weeks to get out the other side. So you can imagine when we're starting above the summer minimum or maximum and we get a 15-inch rain followed by weeks and weeks of rain, we just can't move it through. The analogy I make is it's like 4 sinks and all the drains between them are clogged. And so we can have the lake level discussion, but we can't actually set the levels until we can move that water through. So one of the many things that we're doing is in the county is that we're setting out to unclog those drains. And so as you see 2019, that stretch that's labeled 2019, the red one, at Upper Mud Lake there between Monona and Wabisa, is the first stretch that we're going to go in and remove sediment from later this summer. We chose that stretch because that is probably the worst of all of them. The water there just slows to a trickle. It slows to a crawl. And as you know, there's no dam or anything there. There's a 7-inch difference in the lake levels, but it's all because of that sediment. And that sediment is mostly urban runoff, sand and that sort of thing. So we met with the DNR in January to express to them the urgency of needing to start to address this issue and getting the permitting process in place. And they've been very great to work with. We're working on the permitting process right now. The project is out to bid, and we hope by early September we'll be in the water there removing that first segment. Now, Monona in particular will obviously benefit from this piece. And so we'll be assessing for the future. We'll do at least one a year after that, depending on partnerships we can form with folks, because at this point the county has decided, to get us started, we're footing the whole bill. We just bonded for it. We included it in the 2019 budget because we need to get going. And so we'll be working with partners along the way so we can get that water flowing out. Additionally, we already have a dozen weed cutters. We bought a couple more weed cutters so we can get out there. We were down on the other side of Lake Kaganza a lot during the flooding. We were able to double the outflow there just from getting in there with weed cutters. And that's native weeds. It's just what's naturally there. So sometimes it's sediment, sometimes it's weeds, sometimes it's the way a bridge was built or a railroad trestle. Last year we had to get in down Lake Kaganza. We got an emergency permit to get in and remove sediment and rocks and boulders and stuff like that from underneath a railroad bridge that we were unable to get to before because sometimes the railroads can be challenging to work with. But we were able to get an emergency permit during the flooding to go in and remove that. So in addition to that, we're focusing on acquiring lands that either for preservation or reclamation for water storage, because that's another piece that we have to look at. You may have seen in the news last week, we acquired really what was a dream parcel just outside of Middleton going into Lake Mendota. It's adjacent to the Pheasant Branch Nature Preserve, and it's now a farm, and the county purchased that and will be restoring that to both its original wetland and prairie beginning in the spring. It was planted, so there'll be one more harvest there this year, and then in the spring we'll be going in there. And it's estimated when we're done with that, just that parcel alone will be able to hold an additional 2.6 million gallons of water during a rain event. So it's kind of an all above when we look at the options that we have to take. We have to increase that flow, give us the ability to move the water through, do what we can to keep more of the water, on the ground where it falls, and then utilize our reed cutters and look at our other options. So we'll revisit in a couple of years once we're able to get through all of these to see how the lakes are responding and where we stand then, and we'll continue to look at what further options to utilize if needed. So I think I'll stop there. We'd be happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Questions, anyone? Alder Moore?
Yeah, first of all, thank you to both of you for being here.
Thanks.
Second, what was the outcome as it relates to the restriction of flow from the dams? I understand that the dams, are by and large open at this point.
Yeah.
And yet we know that when dams are created, they're essentially creating an hourglass. Part of the reason why they're there is because that's the narrowest point between two pieces of land. So even if they're open all the time, wouldn't removing them by the very act of doing that increase the width that the water is flowing?
Well,
able to flow through?
Yeah, potentially. The thing is, if you do that, and if Supervisor Buckingham wanted to comment on this too, please feel free. Then you're going to have, right now every lake has a different level, so there will be a lot of unintended consequences to doing something like that. And maybe that's what people would choose to happen, but it's, like so many things, everything is connected, right? And one of the interesting things that I learned is that in Lake Mendota, one of the conversations when folks talk about lowering the level of Lake Mendota, that would actually, it seems counterintuitive, but slow the flow out of Monona because of the push that gives. So it's my understanding that the fact that those dams and locks are there is not so much the issue. It's more that our inability to move the water that we're already letting go through those dams and locks to have that get through these channels. For example, you mentioned like Tenney, that dam was open for a year before the floods came last year. And when we actually then opened up I guess you call them the floodgates, where the boats are, that's when Monona started seeing some real problems. So that's part of the bigger question, if you wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, I was actually just referring less to Tenney and more to the dams downstream, like in Stoughton and Babcock, because it seems to me if the whole idea is to get everything further downstream faster, that might be
I recommend checking out the report.
Okay.
On page 29, you'll see what the models show.
Okay.
And actually, Monona would be drowning many more days out of the year without them. But even the lower lakes show more days above flood level without the dams, and so that was modeled. And so page 29 will show you all of those things. And these charts are, if you want to go through how to read the charts, I'm happy to walk you through that too.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anyone else? No? Well, thank you very much
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
for the update. And it's later this summer you're hoping to
Yeah, we're
start the
hoping
dredging?
September. Yeah.
Okay, September, okay. Thank you.
Mayor, is the chart that they're talking about, is that available on the city's website?
I do
Or
not know.
could we put it on the city's website?
The lake levels report, sure. Or link to it, certainly.
There's a special website that was created as part of the process too, that you can link to the county, that's on the county.
So we could just link to that. Yep, we will look into that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much. Okay, I have, let's see, two people who would like to speak. First, Brad and Jackie Meyer would like to speak in favor of Pirate Island channel dredging in conjunction with Dane County Yahar River dredging. If you'd like to come up to the front and identify yourself and tell us your address and
Hello, I am Jackie Meyer. It's my husband Brad Meyer. We live at 600 Bartell Street in Monona. We have spoken many times before to the Public Works Committee, and now I just wanted to bring it here as well because of the county project that we would be highly in favor of having the Pirate Island channel dredged. If we could have had time to join their project and share the mobilization fees, that would have been great. I understand that probably isn't feasible but just in favor of having that channel dredged as soon as possible due to the conditions in there.
Okay.
Yeah, also in favor of, if they're mobilizing engineering, if we could attempt to piggyback off of that for the Pirate Island engineering or preliminary engineering. I know there's a couple steps in that process, but any amount of piggybacking with their work would be a welcome development for us. County Exec Parisi seemed receptive to it when we talked to him last week at the lake level meeting here. So.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Sarah Davidson, who would also like to speak in favor.
My name is Sarah Davidson. I live at 704 Bartle Street, and I also would like to be in favor of piggybacking the dredging of Pirate Island along with this City of Madison project that we just talked about, echoing exactly the same reasons that Jackie and Brad just stated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And during public appearances, we don't usually get into a back and forth. But I think I'm just going to say a couple things. I think there's several reasons that I think Dan Stefani has been in touch with you about over the past couple of years about why we haven't dredged Pirate Island. And in an ideal world, I'd love to dredge that area too, but we only have a limited amount of money. Specifically dealing with the piggybacking on the county project, we budget like 2 years in advance for these kind of things. So if we were going to do any engineering this year, we would have budgeted for that when we approved the capital budget last fall, and then to do the work the following year, so that in particular, the timing doesn't work, unfortunately. So, but thank you for coming. Okay, I am going to then, there is no public hearing, move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Under unfinished business, item 1A, consideration of ordinance 5-19-716, amending the code of ordinances regarding false building alarms put forth by the police chief. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
There's a second. Were you going to address this, or?
Yeah, no, there was no changes or additions from our review at first reading at the last meeting, and police department and fire department request approval.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item B, consideration of ordinance 5-19-717, amending chapter 480, article 12 of the Code of Ordinances regarding signage regulations put forth by the Plan Commission. Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll move.
Second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This was discussed at the latest Plan Commission meeting in response to the City Council's action at our last City Council meeting. There's a couple memos in your packet which lay out the language that was recommended by the Plan Commission. And I have City Attorney Cole here and our City Planner Douglas Plowman here to answer any questions that you might have on the language. Staff recommendation is for approval of the ordinance with the change that's been recommended by the Plan Commission on the electoral signage question, and then a couple of smaller adjustments to the language, just some housekeeping items. So adoption of ordinance 5-19-717, and then also directing staff to incorporate the ordinance as amended to the city code book.
Alder Thomas.
Yeah, I wanted to raise the issue that you raised last time about not the political signs, but the frame signs like you have in your yard, about the current ordinance allows one.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it at the Plan Commission, and their response was, well, you can just move it. I'm not sure we all feel that way, because if there's a concert sign, if there's a book sale sign, then you're gonna have two signs. And I think the council may wanna think about that, because really we're asking people, I mean, people aren't gonna move their signs and so they're gonna violate the ordinance, and it seems silly to me to have an ordinance that we're asking people to violate. And so I ask my colleagues your thoughts on the matter.
I have some thoughts. Anyone else have any thoughts? No. I guess a couple examples. Most of the time during the summer, I have one of those storm drain signs in my yard and a Clean Lakes Alliance sign. Well, according to this rule, I couldn't have either. Or those concert signs is a good suggestion. That isn't something that the resident even puts in their yard. Susan Manning goes around and puts those in your yard. So is she going to pull any signs from people's yards when she's distributing those, or book sale sign? It just seems to me that if we're going to have this rule, then we should be enforcing it. And if we're going to enforce it, I think limiting it to one is, you're just going to have a lot of cases where people are not going to be following it. So, Alder
For
Thomas.
discussion, I would move to amend to allow 2 signs.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Alder Wood?
So that's an improvement to my mind, to allow twice as many signs. I still think we, outside of the special electoral period where we're allowing, I think it's six signs, you could still, as Attorney Cole pointed out, at the last meeting, if you have multiple residents in one resident, they would not be able to each put up their own sign the rest of the year. If they have something, whether it's a political issue or concerts or
They're different
book sales.
signs. They're different signs. They're both handled differently. The 2-1 is not, doesn't relate to the political signs.
Right, but I'm saying outside of that special 37-day period, 30 days prior and 7 days after the election, right now, you don't have to put up 1 sign with the amendment, you'd be able to put up 2, but if you have more than 2 people who have an opinion about something, you could end up with multiple signs. I just think 2 is still too restrictive. I mean, I guess I would say this, I know there are some streets maybe where people think it's a problem that there are too many signs up. But we're not enforcing essentially, well, I guess we've done some enforcement actions of removing signs from the right of way, but we haven't enforced in terms of the number of signs, correct?
Correct.
So if we had no restrictions on it, it would be no worse than it is right now. If you didn't say, that you can't, didn't put a limit on it.
Is there a question of unique signs? For instance, we had some cases where people had 5 of the exact same sign about slowing down in their yard. Can you maybe change it to
But how many were there, I guess?
2 unique signs? I don't know.
There were a lot.
You would get into content-based regulation then, because one would have to read the sign to know if it was the same as the other sign.
Well, we have the Kathy's motion on the floor. Is there any further comment? Alder Moore, did you have something to say?
I would be happy to second Kathy's amendment.
And I think Molly
Or
has.
motion, rather. Oh,
It's
sorry,
been-
Molly
yeah.
already did?
Mhm.
Sorry. See, I told you I was tired.
Alder Groupie?
At Plan Commission, did you discuss this issue, and was there any sort of consensus about what an appropriate number would be, if not 1 or 2?
1.
Just, that was it?
One.
Okay.
Yep, 1, and if you want to put another one in, you take it out.
I think there was a motion to increase that, or at least some discussion.
There was discussion, I don't think there was a
Could-
motion.
The
Right.
consensus of the Plan Commission was to leave it at 1.
Right. The thought being that, as an example, if you had a storm drain sign and then you had a yard sale you wanted to do, you would take the storm drain sign down to put the yard sale sign up.
I think some people there would have preferred 0.
Right, right.
So this would raise it to 2. Andy? Did you?
just generally I'm supportive of capping it at 2 at this time.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
And just so there's no misunderstanding,
Phil?
during the election period, it increases to 6. It's not 6 in addition to the 1 or 2.
Okay, so it's a total including the political and the non-political, is that what
Correct.
you're saying? Okay, well, that's good to know. Anyone else? Okay, all in favor of Kathy's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now is there any further discussion on the original motion to approve the plan? Alderwood?
So, I won't restate all of my objections from last time, and I think that this is better. But I still think there's a problem with the 37-day period or 38 days, I guess, depending on how you read that. Restrictions on political signs, and for that reason I won't support the ordinance change. I just don't think the city's interest in restricting the number of yard signs people have outweighs people's interest in being able to express their views on their own property.
Anyone else?
I guess, I don't remember if we discussed this previously, but is there a specific number that we had in, like, that somebody could point to for political signs that exceeded 6 that was,
You're talking more number of days, right? The number of signs, or are you?
I see.
talking
No, that is what you said.
I think
That's my mistake.
And I guess I meant to ask the city attorney to address again the issue of having the time periods. My recollection was that was potentially a problem in terms of the constitutionality of the restrictions.
It is. There's case law that precludes the limitation of a time period for political signs. This proposal in front of you is based on the draft language that IMLA, the International Municipal Lawyers Association, has sort of attempted to work around. And it's admittedly hair splitting. I mean, what we're doing is we're not limiting the period of time you can put a political sign up. We're just saying during certain periods that happen to conveniently run concurrently with election periods, the number of signs increases to 6. The reason I'm satisfied with that is because that is still content neutral. You are just saying during certain periods of the year, you can have 6 signs. They don't have to be political signs, they can be any sign that anybody wants. And I think that's, while admittedly a subtle distinction, for constitutional interpretation purposes, it gets you out of strict scrutiny, which is sort of the death knell to these things. So Alder Wood's point is very well taken, and it's very similar to the political sign limitations, but I think it's enough of a difference that it would at least survive scrutiny.
So can I ask another point of clarification then? So for the 2 signs for the rest of the year, one of them could be political?
Yes.
Yes.
Or they both could?
They both
Okay,
Or they both could.
okay.
And during the period of time, 6 of them could be political, or none of them could be
Okay.
political.
Thank you.
Alderwood?
Just one last comment. I find it hard to believe that a federal judge, unless they're looking for a way to, for some reason, to uphold the ordinance, is going to be fooled by the notion that this isn't an attempt to regulate signs based on content, because it's 30 days prior to an election and 7 days after. I mean, it's on its face pretty obvious to me, and I think to most people, why did you choose those 37 days? So.
And the point is well taken. The safer way to address that concern would be to not have those periods at all. Set a sign number now, and for 365 days out of the year, that's your number. This was an attempt to somewhat fulfill the policy concern that during election periods we seem to have a multitude of signs and dealing with that. But I don't disagree with Alder Wood's point that, you know, a judge will look at this with a critical eye and may very well conclude it is nothing more than limiting political speech. This is the way most communities are trying to address it. I think if the council is concerned about that, the solution would be to just pick a number and just make that the number year-round.
Anyone? Alder Kitzler.
As just kind of a simple statement, my concern is more about the unsightly nature of multiple signs, days, weeks, for a full year. I mean, the example we keep using that I think is one reason it's fresh in mind is just 5 of the same sign in a yard isn't getting any point across. So I'm not trying to withhold speech, but at the same time I'm trying to grapple with what are other ways that we can keep away unsightly nature of, repetition or signs that are, whatever. So I don't know, that's just something that is cycling through my head and I don't have an answer for it, obviously.
And every community has struggled with this and come to all different kinds of conclusions. There have been communities that, to your point, have outright prohibited them. For the most part, those have been struck down as just you're limiting political speech.
Mm-hmm.
So this is sort of an exercise of we are limiting speech to a certain extent, and it's how far can you limit without not going too far.
Alder Thomas.
Just to comment, the fact that many communities, and I don't know if it's most, but have concerns about having an unlimited number of signs in that they have really struggled with how do you put some reasonable controls on, should send us a message about community values and community norms. And so I really think that it's important if other communities are doing this and think it's a reasonable risk. And I heard you say safer. I didn't hear you say safe. I heard you say safer. So that tells me the safe way that if we do what you propose, that's relatively safe and nothing is ever guaranteed when you go before a judge.
That's absolutely right. The language I proposed in front of you is language that I feel comfortable arguing in front of the court and believe it would prevail. But you're absolutely right. There's no guarantees in this stuff.
Alder Groupie.
Are there ordinances about other unsightly things on people's personal property that we have in place currently?
Oh, yeah.
Can we get an example
That's why we
of?
have the code enforcement.
Yes, and the sign code,
Employee,
the much
yeah.
larger sign code regulates and prohibits a bunch of signs. Sort of fluttering, inflatable person signs. There are a series in the entire code that you would be approving prohibits a lot of different types of signs.
Okay. But so kitschy landscape windmill things and other, things that we would consider maybe tacky, are those regulated as well?
No.
Like garden gnomes and,
No, there's property.
well,
There's property maintenance ordinances that prohibit trash, debris, unlicensed cars, that sort of stuff. And sometimes I've had citations issued where I do end up arguing in front of a judge, this is debris, and the other person says, no, it's not debris. We had a case in Monona, 10, 15 years ago. I know Kathy would remember it, and Doug. There was a gentleman had a boat in his front yard that had been there for many years, had a tree growing through it. He was issued a citation for having debris in his yard. There was a large community backlash to that. A lot of the community felt that was an endearing part of the neighborhood.
Even though his neighbors complain bitterly about it.
But it is, we do run into that from time to time. The one person's debris is another person's cherished artistic expression.
Yeah. Alder Kur.
I would just say that, remind this body that we are constantly reviewing our codes, and if we feel that we've approved something and then it becomes a problem via code enforcement, we can always make a change to this. You know, if we have people complaining or people in violation of the code, then maybe we address it again as a body.
Okay. Alderwood, did you want to?
No, it's okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Alder Moore.
I would just say that I'm certainly sensitive to Alder Wood's concerns, and I don't think any of us here are in favor of limiting free speech. But this seems like a reasonable accommodation between the two. Again, given that we've also just increased the number of signs that you can have all year, which regardless of content. And it seems like and as was recommended by the municipal attorneys as well, and that a lot of other communities are doing, and it seems to me it's a reasonable compromise under the circumstances.
Anyone else? Okay, all in favor of approving the sign code as approved with the one change that we've already approved tonight, say aye.
Hi.
Opposed?
Yes, I need.
All right,
I'm sorry, did you vote against? Thank you.
motion passes. Next item 1C, consideration of resolution 19-5-2353, approval of electric distribution facilities relocation agreement for Bridge Road reconstruction project put forth by the city administrator.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, this was an item that we had a first read on at our last meeting. Again, this is for the electric distribution for MG&E underneath the Bridge Road project when we do that here in the coming months. Nothing's changed since our last reading on this. Staff's looking for your approval of this item.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
I'm sorry, there was no motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, is there a motion?
I'll second.
Any questions now? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, item D, consideration of resolution 19-5-2354, amending the 2019 capital budget to complete private utility undergrounding on Bridge Road. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
Right.
Again, this is a companion piece to the previous resolution. Again, this is just a budget amendment for a little over $5,000, $5,756, to cover the increased cost for the undergrounding that we discussed. Some of the bids came in a little bit under our estimate, and one of them came in a little bit higher, so this is just that adjustment to cover that cost. Staff is looking for your approval on this item.
Alder Moore, did you have a question? Any questions? Joan, do you need a roll call
Roll
since
call,
this is over
yes.
5,000? Would you please
Yep.
call the roll?
Alder Coor?
Aye.
Alder Thomas? Aye. Alder Groupie?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye.
Alder Kitzler?
Aye.
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Motion passes. Under new business, item 2A, consideration of temporary Class B fermented malt beverage retailer's license for Clean Lakes Alliance Loop the Lake Bike Ride. President James Ty, 150 East Gilman Street, Suite 2600, Madison, Wisconsin, 53703 for the period of June 15th, 2019, and this is started for immediate approval.
Move to suspend the rules and take this out of order.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
We do have a representative from the Clean Lakes Alliance here, if you have any questions.
I would note, I guess I should have said that when I moved approval. This was approved by license review with a variance to not require the fencing which the ordinance otherwise requires. And this will be, so that would, I don't know how you want to handle that, but that was my intent to have that as part of the motion, the variance.
So do we need an amendment, or
Would you agree to that amendment?
Yes.
second concur with that?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other thing I would note, this is at Arrowhead Park instead of Winnequa, which is something new. And there's some reasons for that I could discuss if you'd like.
Questions?
If you're not having the fencing, how will the drinking age be enforced?
Well, there'll still be only a licensed server
Okay.
there. And it's expected basically that the bike route loop will go through the park, and those who want to stop for pizza, a beverage, whether it's beer or something non-alcoholic, could do that. It just didn't seem to us necessary to have the fencing, and in general, I think we've kind of been leaning more towards not requiring fencing for some events. And that it would also be difficult logistically, I think, to have the fencing with the bikes. So.
Alder Moore.
I guess I'm just wondering why the new leaning about the fencing, so that's something that's been standard now for quite some time. I'm unclear as to why you're decided to waive that. In general, I think for myself, at least, it's the experience of going to festivals in Madison where they don't necessarily have fencing, like the Atwood Festival. There's no fencing around any of the, you don't have to go into a special area to drink beer. I think part of it is also to not I don't know. Well, yeah, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. So you'll just have to ask me some other time.
Alder
I
Kitzler?
was just gonna say,
Yeah.
good examples of it is like the 20K Lake Loop run. They don't have a fencing. Any of the city events that have beer don't have fencing. So I think,
Concerts.
I think it's pretty consistently going in this direction anyway.
Anyone else? No? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2B, consideration of applications for 2018-2019 Class B fermented malt beverage and Class B liquor licenses for Berkey's LLC, doing business as Buck and Honey's, 800 West Broadway, Suite 300, put forth by the License Review Committee. This is also started for immediate approval.
Move to suspend the rules and take this out of order.
Second.
Okay, and Mr. Anderson is here if you have any questions. Doug, did you want to?
Suspend.
Should we vote?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve?
To suspend the rules.
No, we did that.
We did that.
Did you?
Did we
Yeah.
We just have to
vote on
vote on it.
I didn't think you
it? We haven't
voted.
voted on it, though.
Yeah.
Vote on it further.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I don't know.
Is there a motion
I'll
to
move
approve
approval.
this?
Second.
Okay. Doug, did you want to address this at all?
It was approved at the License Review Committee. I think we probably spent more time talking about the patio permits. I think that's coming back at a future meeting, not tonight. But Representative Buck and Honey's, or the owner, is here. If you want to have them explain a little bit what they're doing.
Would you like to
You're here.
come up to
Come
the
on up.
podium, please, and introduce yourself?
So we're very excited. This has been about a 2.5-year project in the making. Very close with developers and worked with the city on this, and it's just been a blast to do, and certainly has had its challenges, but we've just continually just get through obstacles and move forward. So we've got an 11,000 square foot restaurant being built at the current project. It's 2 levels. You'll walk in, contemporary American upscale casual. We're kind of right between that family casual and fine dining. So it's very approachable dining, scratch kitchen, craft cocktails, and great wine list, and just a fun atmosphere for all ages. We cover every genre. It's very similar to our concept in Sun Prairie. We've been there for 10 years. Buck and Honey Birkenbind once farmed and owned all the land that we're at, for those that don't know the history and the name. And they were big stewards of the community, and we're kind of taking that same concept and expanding into Monona, and also including Monona as much as we can. I've befriended the previous, well, maybe the third previous owner of this property, which was Inland Boats. And their whole story is really interesting and wonderful. And they built boats here in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. But I've got probably 150 old pictures from that time, and it was during some World War II stuff, where there just some really neat photos that we're creating and bringing history of the area, obviously on the Hara there, and just kind of building Monona within the building.
When are you gonna open?
What's that? July. Sometime in July. We've been aiming for July 1st, but we're still kind of aiming for that. But I'd suspect it'd be a couple weeks into July. So yeah, it's 2 levels. The lower level, I think that some of you have toured it. I know Mayor's been there. A lot of you have been there. But it's 2 levels, and then the main level actually overlooks the park and the water. But that is the parking level where you'd walk in on that, and then it kind of grades down, so the park is its own kind of the garden level, we call it, and that's the inland room. That'll be an event space and overflow dining. So there's 2 patios, and that's probably that is the next meeting that we got to talk to, and we talked to Attorney Cole a little bit on that. But so there is 2 levels. The top level is just access from the main restaurant. It's got this huge waving pergola with a 30-foot fire feature that overlooks the water in the park. That's really neat. And then the lower level is kind of that area that would service the park, and people that are coming from their boats and hanging out, pull up on the bike loop, and so that area will be serviceable for the boats, and it will have some patio seating out there, and we'll service it. It's kind of built to pivot if we need to. We really don't. This is a really unique concept and how this is being built, and there's really nothing like it in Dane County to even try to compare it to. So we don't know where, if the business is, if everybody wants to sit down below off their boats and by the park and have their meals there, then we'll sort of do full service there. But we could see it being a limited menu down there, and then our full larger menu up on the main level for the dining. There's also a conference room that seats 16 with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out the water, and it's got a lot of neat, really cool design features, and we're pretty excited about it. Does that answer any questions?
Any questions? No? Doug?
Excuse me, not a question, but I'm glad now I had the city attorney at the license review committee meeting, so he could remind me that when I leave, that I left something out of the motion, which is to require them to install and maintain digital video surveillance as approved by the chief of police.
Okay, and who seconded that?
That was
I did, I
Alder
think.
Kitzler. Oh, well, 4 people did it at the same time, so. it was-
One.
Alder Kitzler was next to me.
Okay, is that
So,
all right with you, Alder
that's
Kitzler?
fine.
I'm sorry, Alder Wood, could you give me those words again? Install and maintain.
Digital video surveillance digital video surveillance as approved by the chief of police.
And if I could just address that, the detective was there. He didn't have his card on him at the meeting. I gave
Right.
him mine, and we are ready to kind of lay out our cameras. We have a 30 camera system that we're laying out, and we do want to just get in touch with him if someone could relay a message to try to reach out sooner than later, or else give me his number and I'll reach out to him too.
That was Lieutenant Weigel.
Lieutenant
I
Weigel.
can
No,
have
it was
contact.
Losby.
Okay.
It was Losby.
It was
Was it?
Losby.
Oh. Wrong then. Either way, I'll send him an email and have him
Yeah,
contact you.
the next few days, that'd be great.
Okay.
And then as I'm addressing you, since we're here, the patio, I talked to my contractor today, and we could talk about this off record too, but the patio is, I think it's set for June 4th. Is that correct, Joan? Do you remember? Is that the date on that?
I'm sorry, the next council meeting is June 3rd, Monday?
June 3rd, okay.
Yep.
The lead time for our fencing to order and build this is like 6 weeks. So if there's a way to talk to whoever we can talk to ahead of time, we certainly want to build that the right way on how the council and how it gets approved. But I just found that out today. I thought it was only going to be 2 to 4 weeks. So I could talk, we can give you a call, Bill, and just chat about it.
Sure. Well, why don't you and I talk right after this item, and
Okay.
I can go through it with you.
Sounds good, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anyone?
So we need the second, I don't know, we figured out,
He did.
was it?
Andy did.
And, okay.
Right, Andy did. Okay, so no
Thank
other
you.
questions? I think we're all really excited about you coming to Monona. So thank you for coming tonight.
This is my son Tommy too, he just, I drove in from college today, so I made.
We know what you'll be doing this summer.
Yeah. My intern.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, thank you. Next item, 2C, consideration of application for transfer of retail 2018-2019 Class B fermented malt beverage and Class B liquor licenses for Tasting Room of Monona Incorporated, doing business as the Tasting Room, from 6,000 Monona Drive, Suite 103, to 800 West Broadway, Suite 100, put forth by the License Review Committee. This is also starred for immediate approval.
I move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Alderwood.
So this is for the transfer of their current license from their Monona Drive location to the new, current development, and it was recommended for approval by the License Review Committee. And again, I forgot to add the digital video surveillance as approved by the police chief to my motion. If we do enough of these, I might remember that.
Who was the second on this?
Molly was, I was first. I don't know who the second one.
Joan, who was the second?
It was me.
It was Alderwood, then Alder Gerby.
Okay, so Molly, are you okay with that? All right.
Better get your act together, Alderwood.
Right.
Better get it together.
Anything else? Any questions?
The owners are here.
Oh, okay.
We do also have their patio permit is on the agenda as the next item, which I think there was, again, probably more discussion about that at the committee, but that's not what we're on yet, so.
Okay. Any other question about switching the license location? And did you have any questions for the owners?
Or if they wanted to make
Or
any.
if you wanted to come up and,
I know they talked about the opportunities, I think, for increasing their business with a much better, they're going to have far better air circulation than they had at their previous location. Expect to probably make more use of the liquor license than they were at their current location. They do have to keep in mind that the ratio of tobacco sales to alcohol sales, I think, has to be 70-30. Or 30-70.
Statute of limitation was, that it actually is 30% tobacco.
30, okay.
Yeah, and we're at about the converse right now.
You know, while you're here, do you want to just speak to a little bit about kind of what new improvements are in this new facility?
yeah, sure, you want to come up?
And-
And could you identify yourself? Give us your name and address, too, when you get up here.
Yeah.
He'll do most of the time.
We're partners. Jason Smith, it's my wife Jessica Smith. So for the last 2 years, well, first of all, my wife.
our address?
Yeah, could you give us
We're
your
at
address?
4701 Tony Watha Trail here in
Oh.
Monona. My wife is a lifelong resident of Monona. I've lived here for about 20 years. I was a customer for many years at the tasting room, and Brian Schaefer is who we purchased that business from about 2 years ago. We've made some modest improvements, but one of the things that we were unhappy with was the air quality. So what we did was we made a substantial investment into a new air system. We hired a professional firm along with, engineers, HVAC engineers. What they did was they were able to design a system that provides fresh air within the enclosed portion that we're talking about at the 3,000 square foot size, provides fresh air inside every 4 minutes throughout the hour. So there would be little to none. And that complies with the international standards for any indoor smoking facility, whether it's here or in Europe. The only other place that we're aware of that has that level of air exchange would be the Bellagio's Cigar Lounge in Las Vegas. It may be a bit overkill, but we wanted it to be a safe and fun environment for people not just that work there, but also people that come to enjoy the location. We also, in our existing space, did not have much room to provide, sort of craft cocktails, tap beers. So we actually added a full-service bar into the new location. And then along with, I guess you guys already have the patio permit. One of the other things I'll just say, since the committee got to hear this, or subcommittee got to hear this, you may not know this, but the tasting room of Monona is a member of what's called the Tobacconists Association of America, which is a very elite and small group. About 70 stores throughout the United States qualify, and we're one of them. We might actually be the only one in the state right now.
I think there's one in
lapsed, I think. But what that does is it gives us the right to get access to very exclusive handmade cigars. A lot of times people don't know this. There's no chemicals in cigars. They're hand rolled. They say 200 to 300 pairs of hands touch every cigar. But this organization, it also allows us to forge relationships with other cigar manufacturers. We have a relationship with a man by the name of Rocky Patel, who is a University of Wisconsin graduate, but he founded and owns the #4 premium cigar brand in the world. We've partnered with him. He'll be here for our grand opening in July, probably bringing some other high-profile cigar people. It really does, for cigar smokers in general, this will be a destination for them. We have regular customers that come from 30 different states around the United States that come to Monona, that come to this shop because of that access to the premium cigars, limited edition cigars and premium cigars that you can't find other places. So it really is sort of a hidden jewel, and we're just happy to be able to share that experience with more people.
Interesting. I had no idea. Andrew?
This doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your liquor permit, but how is the setup of that in your store? Is there a separate room to smoke and drink? Is it all one room?
No, it's all in one area. I mean, it complies with the state's smoking ban. But the center of the store is about a 400 square foot humidor with thousands of different cigars. We have over 1,000 SKUs anyway. They may not always be there every day, but
10,000 cigars. We've kind of got the count down.
But around the rest of it, like I said, but when you have the system that we had designed, it's a little bit bigger than a pickup truck, and it sits below the unit. We cut through 15 inches of concrete to bring the airflow from the outside in. But it, like I said, every 4 minutes you have absolute fresh air. Now, I wouldn't make this as this is an anecdotal comment that my HVAC engineer told me, but what he said was, you could shut and lock all the doors with people in the building, turn on a semi-trailer and let it idle, and everybody would be fine. So I wouldn't recommend it.
We'll be testing it.
But that was, we just wanted it to be, like I said, as safe and comfortable for both smokers or non-smokers.
And we don't allow lounges before that. You'll notice somebody's smoking near you. It's not as, right now, when you walk in, you can tell it's a cigar lounge. But I think that our goal is kind of to, I can have a glass of wine, he can be smoking a cigar, and we can, live happily.
But there will be it's no cigarettes, both inside or outside. That's not allowed. That also is in compliance with the state ban.
And are you allowing smoking of cigars outside on the patio?
Yes. It's pipes and cigars, which are what the statute allows.
Alder Moore.
I might have missed this because I had to step out momentarily, but I know where are we at with Class B liquor licenses, since they did not have a hard liquor license before?
They did.
They did.
They did. Oh, I thought it
Yeah.
was just wine before.
No.
Oh,
Yep.
see?
That was.
Obviously haven't been in,
Yeah.
or I would know.
I think at one time that was the case, but.
Okay.
So this
I
is
thought
just transferring it to a different location?
Okay, I thought he had just said that they were building a bar and doing something different, so that's why. Okay, thank
But
you.
we are, you're correct.
Yeah.
We are expanding the offerings by
Okay.
having a full-service bar.
Okay.
We had the
Okay.
license, it just wasn't being utilized.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And maybe you want to stay up here for the next one. Jen?
I just have a comment. I'm wondering if we have these forms that are filled out for the liquor licenses or the patio permits, if we have PDF fillable forms, or if these are paper forms that get filled out, because they're
Good
incredibly
question.
difficult to read.
The liquor license forms is a state required form. They could, if they chose, go to the state Department of Revenue's website and fill it out there. There's a fillable. I modify it for local businesses, so you'll see due dates written in and other notes of things that are commonly missed when they're filling out the forms. So I tried to make it easier for applicants. So,
I was just curious.
yeah.
All right, then the next item, D, consideration of application for 2018-2019 patio permit for Tasting Room of Monona Incorporated, doing business as the Tasting Room, 800 West Broadway, Suite 100, also put forth by the License Review Committee. This is also started for immediate approval. Is there a motion?
Move to take this out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to approve this?
So I will move approval with the requirement that video surveillance be installed as approved by the police chief.
Second.
And Joan, was there some other variance that we had talked about? 'Cause
I had listed this as a possible variance on the agenda because it's my understanding that the applicants were looking for an expanded, remain open time, if you will, beyond what the ordinance would typically allow.
Correct. Our understanding was that the current ordinance stops all patio at 9 PM.
Right.
That's correct.
And we don't, I mean, we don't stay open past 11. So we were thinking that on weekdays, maybe 10 PM, and then on a Friday or Saturday, it could go until midnight. But we're actually going to close at 11, but we were just thinking if we didn't want somebody, if we were still cleaning up, to be in violation if they were past 11.
We need that, we need to ask that.
One other thing, can you clarify for the council how many outdoor patio seats we're thinking of including? That may trigger another variance.
I printed this off. And this, and I'll say that with this caveat, we have not had the chief out yet, so whatever the seating is here in terms of occupancy is, I would assume, subject to what they would say, so we'll comply with whatever they recommend.
The ordinance limits you to 40.
Well, then I guess it's 40.
That's okay. Pretty sure. Yeah. we'll do.
So if the chief hasn't approved this, can we approve the permit?
You could approve a contingent upon his approval.
Okay. Alder Thomas.
I know you have speakers.
Oh, yes, there are 2 outdoor speakers that we would have, I guess we were
They're
looking
capped
at.
at, I
They're
think.
capped at, I think 70 decibels is what they were capping
Just
it
for
at.
background music, nothing.
I mean, the reality.
Oh, I guess it is a speaker. I don't know if it's on the building. I don't know if it's not I don't think it's technically amplified, but or
It is.
is it?
Yeah, that's what
If
it
it's a
is.
speaker. it's
Oh, it is?
amplified.
Okay.
Yeah, my concern is that there are homes across the river.
Of course, yeah.
And so if you're open until midnight or 11 and have the music at, we have a restriction on the yacht club on how late they can have their music, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, all beer gardens are limited, need to close by 9 o'clock unless this body were to give them an exemption. As it relates to amplified music, they need a permit for that, and the standard for the beer gardens is at the property line, it needs to comply with our noise ordinance threshold.
Was that the 70 decibels, or was it?
Correct, yeah, it's,
Okay.
the noise ordinance.
Our plan, anyway, if you were so inclined to approve it, was to have those two speakers, we would have somebody come and check the level, and we would keep it at that. And the reality is, it's not a concert setting, it's not a party, it's more of, if you're, for cigar smokers in general, I don't mean to over stereotype, but it's a conversational experience, it's not a concert experience. It was really just to have some background noise to maybe offset the traffic on Broadway. That was the thinking. And our idea was to check it to make sure it complies with the decibel level, and then put a Sharpie line on the volume so that that doesn't go beyond that.
So who controls the speakers?
The management would, and we would
Okay.
keep it at a certain level, and it's not to go above that.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to limit it to, I can get you the ordinance, but it's 65 decibels between 7 a.m. and
Okay.
9 p.m. 55 decibels after those hours
Okay.
At the property line.
at the property.
Alder Groupie.
I'm just curious about if there are any events at the park, if there will be any sort of conflict with competing noises or competing music. Will there be any sort of exception or
This is more
communication
around
between-
the side and the front, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're right on the Broadway, and that was one of the things we took into consideration when we first all sat down, because we've been involved also for a couple of years on this, and we knew that the park itself was more of a family-oriented experience, and we thought it'd be best if we were on the opposite side, just to stay
Great.
out of the fray, so to speak. But we still would keep the noise level down.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep, sure.
So your patio is facing Broadway?
Facing Broadway, yeah, and we're the only business really at that end that had, there's some offices in between, but we're the only public space at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alder Kitzler.
As far as the patio, you said you've been in conversation with probably Steve and other developers as it's been going on. I'm just thinking about the apartments above, and with smoke rising, is there a special HVAC? Did they approve having a patio knowing that smoke would travel?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that. 'Cause I know-
My understanding, and I don't want to speak for Steve, but my understanding, we were one of the first people, both Bucket Honeys and us, around the same time, that signed LOIs before they even had the full approval for the building. And the way that the building sits at the end closest to Broadway, it actually comes away from, so we're not directly below, the patio's not directly below any of those upper units.
Mhm.
So it comes out a good maybe 30 feet or more, and then comes out, then the patio starts out here. And one of the discussions was with a predominantly sort of southeast prevailing wind, if people were sitting on a patio 30 or 40 feet away from anybody elevated up on the building, most of the wind comes across the patio, so it would sort of disperse.
And also having fans on the pergola, I think that would stop it from going up
Yeah.
and over, more dispersing.
Right, our plan was also just maybe more so really for mosquitoes than anything else, but was to have larger fans, but that would also help disperse any smoke from people that were sitting there.
Alder Thomas.
So could the clerk read, what's the motion as it stands, and does it include the variance?
No, the variance is separate, I believe. So right now, the motion is to approve the application for the patio with a video requirement included. The variance discussion, would be probably a separate motion, I think,
I would think it has to be,
approve.
isn't it amendment to
Right.
the
Right.
main motion?
Right, and then whatever you choose to be your, whatever variance you choose to approve would be on the actual license certificate, so that it's always posted. I have an example from Waypoint. Waypoint had variances granted, and they're listed on the actual license that's posted.
Can you tell us what the variances are
Yeah.
for Waypoint?
For Waypoint, keep in mind, does not face any residences. And the patio use will cease at midnight, Sunday through Wednesday, and they're actually open until 2 a.m. Thursday through Saturday. Their seating capacity is no greater than 65 persons. So there is precedent for variances being approved.
I
By-
believe Do they not also have a variance for the fencing?
No, they have fence.
Do they?
So they have the 20 by 50 fenced outdoor patio.
And what is breakwater? Do they have a variance?
They have a variance for their outdoor area. I did not bring that example, but it has, they needed to cease all service out there by 9 o'clock, and I believe staff.
Is this
can-
on the top, or is this on?
The whole outdoor
The whole
part.
outdoor part.
I believe they wanted to leave an area open for patrons to come by boat after 9 o'clock and to come and go from there, and that was till 10 o'clock. So they're done by 10, I believe. I don't know if Alderwood has the examples that I printed. Did you bring those at all? No. Okay. This is the only example I brought, so off the top of my head, as I recall, it was a little more restrictive because of the residences directly across from Breakwater's patio area, so.
Alder Corr.
If we were to approve the variance, and then there were issues down the road, how difficult is it to revoke a variance?
You can make it subject to, at least what Plan Commission does, is to make it subject to something if there were neighborhood complaints, or if there were complaints, and then it would be re-reviewed.
You would need to make that a condition of the grant, though. If you did not, then that would be a right under
Yeah.
the license.
It's a permit, it's not a license.
That's true. You're
So
right.
it does expire after a year. It's not,
So we're not locked in, essentially.
right, correct.
Correct.
They don't have a property interest in the permit.
Yeah, permit, right. So next year, when it comes up for renewal, you could change it then.
So can someone enumerate for us the variances that they're looking for, that so we can consider amendments?
Well, I think it'd behoove them to know what they're asking you for. Right now, the ordinance reads that they can only have 40 people out at the beer garden at once. The beer garden has to close at 9 o'clock. There can be no separate bar out on the patio. And the patio has to be completely enclosed by a 5-foot fence. Those would be the normal issues that if anybody's going to seek a variance, they're going to. So I would suggest it would be incumbent on the applicant to tell you what, if any.
Sure, and I can, based on our previous conversations, we would request that, I believe that the number of seats that now this would, of course, be subject to our meeting in approval, or I guess the discussion with the police department with regard to occupancy. But we would ask that it, if approved by the police department, that go from 40 to 54 seats. That the time on a weekday would be 10 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. And that on a weekend, or maybe a day preceding a holiday, that it would be no later than midnight.
So by weekend, do you mean Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I meant Friday or Saturday night.
Friday or Saturday.
Thank you for clarifying.
Alder Kitzler.
Alderwood, do we know what Buck and Honey's is requesting as far as any variances for their patio permit?
My understanding is that they are asking until, I know they're going to be open until midnight, but, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, if you know, I don't recall what they said. Joan, do you recall?
They'll definitely need more than 40 seats because they.
Well, yeah, right.
So they're going to request, I'm sure, additional seating.
But the hours of operation?
The hours, I did not get a sense of what hours they were going to ask for. We didn't talk about closing time outside with them, so.
I don't recall them discussing it at all, yeah.
And I guess one reason I ask is just, I mean, I want to be generally consistent with all the businesses there, whether it's Buck and Honey's, you guys, or Breakwater too. So I want to be just mentally cognizant. And of course, Breakwater was there first, so they established some precedent there, but doesn't mean we can't approve this variance, and then they can come back and ask to be treated equally. But I'm just trying to figure that out in my head so that we're.
Although, I mean, I do think they're all a little bit different. Breakwater, sits up somewhat high, and their residence is literally, right across the river, and the river's not all that wide.
And they have live music, that's the.
They have yeah,
True.
although it is,
Fair point.
it's fairly low key, my understanding. So
Good point.
this would be a little different, more isolated from impacts on residents around the area.
But not on residents that live above them. I mean, the residents that are above them would be closer.
Yeah, well, there wouldn't be residents directly above, right?
Not directly, but yeah.
But they'd be close enough.
They would be close, correct. And that was one of the, considerations, obviously, with regard to setting the noise level at something very low as background music, so that we weren't disturbing, and also not going into the AM hours, even on the weekend, so as not to disturb the residents.
I guess separate, sorry.
Go ahead, Alder
I guess
Kitzler.
separate and aside from that, you probably can glean off of my questions, just the concern around smoke. I know being on Parks and Rec Board, that was a huge concern, having a park there, and just when the restaurant was announced, people were a little bit concerned about smoke wafting. So, I personally am looking forward to, fine wines. I've never been in your establishment. One reason is just because a lot of people have told me that when you go in there, you really smell like smoke leaving, so it's really never, but that shouldn't be an excuse for me. So I apologize for never. But I just want to, for the extent that you're able to, especially in this patio area, provide fans, provide, kind of make sure, the prevailing winds are the way. I know you can't control that, but that is still a general concern of mine, is just the wafting of the cigar. Because to me, a cigar, it carries much more than cigarette, even though I enjoy smelling cigar or a pipe more than I do a cigarette. So, I'm supportive of a patio. We'll see about the variances, but that's just my general concern about kind of allowing smoking outside. I know we can't necessarily control it on a private property, but that's just kind of my viewpoint, and wanted to share that with you. So,
And your point is well taken. I mean, we wouldn't have made the substantial investment into an upgraded HVAC system in this new location if we weren't already aware of and concerned about the current smoke conditions. So.
No, I completely understand.
Alder Moore.
Yeah, I would just say, aside from just as it relates to the variance for hours, I've recently, in fact, I was going to bring it up at Park and Rec, I've recently received some complaints from residents around Schluter Park over generally the park hours, going till 10 o'clock, just park hours, no music, no anything, because when people are in the park, if you live really close, even if people are having a loud conversation, if it's a quiet night, it really carries, and people are being kept up, and so they actually approached, a few residents actually approached me about why we allow the parks to be open until 10 period, and shouldn't we be shutting down the parks earlier. So it just, I throw that out as a data point. I'm not saying that would apply to all residents, or that it's necessarily something we should be doing, but I do think that 40 or 50 people on a patio until 10 o'clock can obviously, again, even without music, could be relatively loud.
Mayor, if I
Yes.
could,
Attorney
that
Cole.
does raise one other issue. The ordinance establishes noise limits based on decibel at the lot line. We need to keep in mind this is a condominium, business condominium. So the lot line is a lot farther away than what the unit limits will be. If the lot, I have a good idea where you are, but say the lot line to the Broadway right-of-way is 100 feet, there may be a unit 50 feet away that is not, it's much closer than the lot line, if you know what I mean. So you may want to take that into consideration when you decide, whether or not to allow them variances in the times and that sort of thing, because technically, if you went with the lot line as the ordinance goes by, they could play music at a higher decibel level to the neighboring condominium units than would be at the lot line.
Alder Thomas.
I'm not so worried about the people in the apartment units, quite frankly, because I think the landlord would be on your case pretty heavily, and you might not have a lease for very long. So I figured that will work it out. I also think that Alderperson Kerr's suggestion that, we put some conditions on this, so if it doesn't work out, because you can imagine the worst case scenario of any of this if you want to, and it may never happen. You might not have any noise, you might only have 20 people out there. The people might enjoy the soft music, somebody might enjoy, you just, and when we redevelop that and we put these businesses in there who need to sell alcohol, and it's on the water and they want to be outside, you put some risks in. So I think, I absolutely agree with her thing about you put some conditions on that aren't going to hamstring you in terms of being able to do business, but that we, and that we not worry about the worst case scenario because it may never happen.
Anyone else?
I would just say that, to your point, we have to be back every year. And if we're not good corporate citizens, we'll hear about it, and we should.
So to start things off, I will move to amend and grant a variance which would allow 54 seats, would allow them to be open till 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, till midnight on Friday and Saturday. I'm sighing because I'm trying to think about whether we need to put how we make two things, and that is equity between businesses that are located down there who have patios, and the notion about if there should be a terrible event, can we bring them back? I mean, we do that at the Plan Commission every time, and if the attorney has something he'd like to suggest to the amendment, I would welcome that.
Well, Alder Wood's point is well taken. I mean, every year they have to come back, and you would have the discretion to not grant it. If I understand your point, it's, well, what about if halfway through the permit period something happens and you wish to revoke it halfway through there?
Or review it, or slap their hands, or call them in and say, this is warning number one if it happens again.
Well, you would have the discretion to the extent they violate any provision in the code that is not subject to a condition you're granting. So for instance, if they do play the music too loud, that would be grounds for you to summon them back in. If they were late at the closing hours, you could. I think that's as good as you're going to be able to get. I would be hesitant to say, and we can withdraw it at any time. I mean, you certainly could. You could make this permit a day-by-day permit.
Well, I don't want to do that because they have an investment.
Right. And I think to that point, I would suggest you just leave it the way it is with your, assuming the council approves these waivers. If it's a problem, you can revisit it a year from now. If it's a very exigent problem, presumably there's other violations that we can issue citations for.
Okay, so I will leave my motion as is.
Is there a second?
I would second.
If I may.
Yeah, Doug, and then Alder Groupie.
Oh, it's subject to police.
Be fire chief.
I'm
For the
sorry,
occupancy.
what was, the capacity? Okay, okay.
They had also requested for days preceding holidays to be
Okay.
able to be open till midnight. That was
Yep, that's fine with
Are we federally recognized holidays, state recognized? I mean, I don't want to be the lawyer here, but we should probably define what we mean by holiday.
the holidays that are on my calendar.
Aldertown's birthday.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say state or federally recognized holidays.
Well, I guess my intent to that, without looking at the actual statutory recognized holidays, the intent was if there were a Memorial Day or, a Labor Day, we wanted, the ability for people to be able to, if we thought that the majority of people didn't have to work the next day because of the holiday, that they might be able to stay out a little later.
So
That's the intent, but I don't know how best to word it.
So then you're basically talking about Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day.
Oh, could be.
Actually, we could just.
Well, there
just
are
name those.
there actually are
outside.
10. There actually are 10 federally recognized holidays.
But during the winter.
But I'm guessing many
So-
of those we wouldn't want to be outside.
Right.
Yeah.
No one's gonna be
Labor
out there in
Day?
December.
Memorial Day.
And 4th.
Yeah,
It's 3.
Okay.
Memorial
Are we-
Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day.
There.
let's just enumerate those three.
Yeah.
We'll ask that you just enumerate those three, the days preceding those three.
Okay.
So you want that as part of the motion, the date?
Yes,
Received?
please.
Okay, hold it.
Now, we had a second. Is that agreeable to Alder? Okay.
Which
Okay.
were the three?
Yeah.
Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day.
What about like New Year's Eve? No?
I don't
You
think
guys
we'll be out
don't
on the
let it
patio.
work
No.
Well, you guys have fire pits, so I didn't know.
Yeah, that's true.
You can apply for that
It's
next
your
year.
call.
Okay.
Alder
Let's build
Groupie.
bigger fire pits.
I just wanted to ask for a point of for clarification. You had said you would like to be open till 11 on weeknights. Was that your original request? Or did you say 10 was sufficient for
I think 10
weeknights?
is
Okay.
sufficient.
I just wanted to make
We
sure there wasn't a
typically
disconnect
close at
between what was.
around 9 or 9:30 on the weeknights anyway, so 10 is fine.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Anybody else?
Just one.
Alder Wood.
So just the comment that I think if there were problems that the city became aware of, License Review Committee would probably invite you to come to a meeting and discuss those with us.
Sure.
Of course.
Invite is kind of a misnomer.
Anybody
They were air
else?
quotes.
Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is actually just a new business item that we're not going to approve tonight. Item E, consideration of resolution 19-5-2356, approval to submit 2018 compliance maintenance annual report, CMAR review, and recommendations put forth by the Public Works Director.
Before you take a vote. Madam Mayor, I did talk with the Public Works Director about this, and we would be open to this being started for single action only because it's a kind of perfunctory report that we have to file with DNR. So we would be open to that if you were amenable.
If that's okay with people, if you want to make a motion to approve.
Move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve
Move
this?
to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Or Brian, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. Again, this is a pretty standard report that we file with DNR every year for our sewer system. Again, we're graded as a A, which is the highest grade that you can get, and the report kind of breaks down the different things that we do both from a financial standpoint and from an operational standpoint for our system. If you've got any specific questions about the report, I'd be happy to address them, but there are just a couple of things that I would point out for you. If you go to, I guess it would be the page where it says number 4, future planning, in the report, we have listed an amount of $275,000 for 2020. What that project is, it's McKenna Road, which would include the lining of the pipe from Dean to Greenway. That would be the project that's next upcoming in the system. If you go to the next page after that, where it says 46 natural gas consumed, that's combined for all of our lift stations. That's included in that total. We do have variable speed drives at all of our pumping stations to help with the efficiency of our system. And then if we go, let's see here, it would be couple pages back where it says number 2, operation and maintenance. Basically what we do every year is we televise about a third of the pipes every year to determine which ones need to be cleaned, and then include that in future budgeting purposes. So we try to keep on top of that so we don't have a big number that comes forward from a budget standpoint in any one given year. And if you go to the next page after that, number 3, performance indicators, just kind of a piece of interesting information. If you look at total amount of precipitation last year in inches, it says 50.64. That's for 2018. Our average annual precipitation is 37. So again, you just see kind of how 2018 was an outlier for our system.
Hopefully.
Yep, hopefully. And then if you go a little bit further down where it says average daily flow in millions gallons daily, we in 2018 we're at 0.989. Typically we're at 0.7. So again, you just see what we were experiencing last year. And then if you go one more page to number 5, infiltration and inflow. Again, the only other big kind of project that's hanging out there is we're working with Madison on an interceptor leak at our border. But Madison is taking the lead on that project, which will be rebid in 2020. So with that, again, as I mentioned, we scored the highest you could possibly score in this rating system, and staff would recommend approval of this report.
Questions, Alder Kitzler?
I just had 2, and I don't know if you or Dan, I'll have to answer this, but so I noticed the percentage of cleaning, removal, and some other ones, aside from televising, are pretty low as far as the percentage of our system per year.
Mm-hmm.
The question I would have is, are there areas within those categories that he or Public Works would like to see increased? Is this a good average that we're having per year, or is this kind of really low because of either budgetary restraints or personnel restraints?
That's a fair question. I can get a response from him.
Okay.
But yeah, typically it's going to come down to a budget issue of how much person hours we have available.
Okay. And then one thing I ask him annually, I think when I see this report, is the I&I, specifically kind of in my area with all the sub pumps and different things like that. I know that's a concern. He mentions in here, or somebody mentions in here, that there's areas that they're going to be addressing. I'm interested in what those areas are and what they're looking at repairing.
Sure, we can give the council a list of that.
Given all that, are you okay with voting on this tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Final item F, consideration of resolution 19-5-2357, approving the purchase of site furniture for the Riverfront Park Plaza put forth by the Riverfront Park Plaza Ad Hoc Steering Committee. This is also started for immediate action. Is there a motion?
Move to suspend the rules, take this out of order.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second. Brian, did you have something to add about the funding?
Yeah, so a question was posed before the meeting about, basically what staff is looking for is approval to purchase $36,000 and change worth of site furnishings for the Riverfront Park project. This was already approved in the 2018 capital budget. Question was posed prior to this meeting about could TIF dollars be used for this purchase, even though we did put it in the CIP. I did check with our finance director. It's actually a question that we have to have our auditors weigh in on to see if it would meet the statutory obligations. So it's one thing we will attempt to pay for it out of TIF if we can, but we have to review that with auditors before we can make that final determination.
Thank you.
So we're okay with voting on this as is?
Yes,
Although we
with the
don't know
understanding that we will attempt to do a TIF if possible. I do have images of the site furnishings if you were interested in seeing them. The basic, the committee members that were at the meeting could feel free to chime in as well. The committee decided to kind of go with a mixture of white and blue for the cafe tables and the terrace seating to kind of give a pop of color to the park area. The garbage cans and the kind of larger seating areas that seat 5 and 3 people all have a wood type material on them, so they kind of match from that design standpoint. And then the general color for the metal around the different parts of the furnishings is all this powder coated black. So you have kind of consistent theme amongst the different components, including the bike racks.
Alder Thomas.
Just a question on TIF, because I will ask the question every time. So when the Zamboni comes up, are we paying for the Zamboni on TIF? Because you can pay for a truck, you can't pay for a driver. So I am a great, because I love TIF. I think TIF is wonderful. But we all are paying for the people who are driving the snow plows and monitoring that stuff. So therefore, I'd like TIF to pay for what it can. And that includes whatever, I know it can't pay for the shelter, but there's a Zamboni and there's a ton of other things down there. And I hope we would look into
Sure, we can do that.
paying as much of those things as we can out of TIF. And if we don't have enough in this TIF, maybe we can borrow it from another TIF district.
Alder Kitzler.
One thing I'll just note that I asked at Finance and Personnel is, I know the fiscal note mentions the $300 and some odd thousand that we budgeted for the park. Of that, of furniture, it's over $100,000 that we budgeted, so this is well within that realm. There are a few other pieces of furniture equipment that will have to come before us to be taken out of that budget, but I just wanted to give us a perspective of where this $36,000 kind of lays within the subset budget, if you will.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, so he's correct that $100,000 budgeted for site furnishings for the whole park. This is about $37,000 worth of that. The other things that will be coming, forthcoming in the coming weeks is about $20,000 for the wood seat tops that for the curved seating area that's included in there, and then $1,800 for the bike repair station that will be included as part of the park, and then about $4,000 for Adirondack chairs as well. So
More TIF.
more TIF.
And I was just going to add further, as an ad hoc chair to this committee, that part of the reason why we're not spending the full $100,000 for the furniture is because we're going to be doing a lot of our own installation once the furniture arrives.
Anyone else?
Isn't the wood seating that sort of follows the wall, isn't that gonna have to come out of this money too?
Yep.
Isn't that
That's that $20,000.
That's the $20,000 I just mentioned.
20? Okay, I thought it was gonna be more than that. Right.
Anyone else? Okay, if there's nothing else, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Coor.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Groupie.
Aye.
Alder Moore.
Aye.
Alder Kitzler.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Next item is reports of committees, commissions, boards, etc. I guess we will start with Alder Coor this time.
Just a note, Public Works is going to begin removal of a large portion of ash trees near Wallace on the north side of town. Residents will be notified, but it's 29 trees that are going to be coming out. We've had, it's an area where we planted only ash trees within the terrace, and so it's going to be a significant change for that section. And so there's a chance that residents are going to be concerned. We're going to try and be proactive and do some PSAs on WVMO and kind of get the word out that this is a specific case within the city where we have a large concentration of trees. We're seeing that the ash trees are getting to the point where they're needing to be removed, and we'll see it across the city, but this is probably going to be a larger impact than more other ones.
What section?
I don't want to give the exact,
Oh.
just because residents haven't been notified yet.
Okay. Alder Wood?
Well, as you might have figured out, we had a license review committee meeting last week. Other than that, I have no report.
Alder Kitzler?
No report.
Alder Moore?
As has been reported, we will have we've signed a contract with Renew Wisconsin related to doing a group solar buy this summer, and there's 3 information sessions to be held at the library, at Rosie's, and the third one go to Sustainable Monona Facebook page or to the Sustainability Committee pages on the web and look for information sessions if residents are interested in purchasing solar for their homes or investigating whether it makes sense for their homes.
Alder Groupie.
And don't forget to take the resident energy survey, available online at mymonona.com.
And Alder
No
Thomas. City Clerk.
Board of Review is June 4th, and residents who weren't able to go to open book should go to their assessment notice and call the toll-free number on their assessment notice to speak with the assessor prior to being put on the Board of Review agenda. And if you're not satisfied there, please call me and we'll get you on the agenda.
Okay. City Administrator.
Yes, thank you. So the Public Safety Committee had asked staff to do kind of a debrief of their response to the 2018 flood event. So we held kind of a tabletop exercise / discussion that was facilitated with Larry Reed this morning as part of our staff meeting. So all the department heads and a couple other select staff members participated in that. I don't want to speak for all the staff, but I thought it was useful for us to get together in a room and kind of do a debrief of what occurred and what lessons were learned and what things that we might do differently if, heaven forbid, the situation were to happen again. So I think we left with that meeting with a couple of things that we will look to do to prepare ourselves for a future event. And at some point, we'll have kind of a brief summary of the lessons learned and the action steps that I will be happy to share with the council in the coming weeks. So I thought it was a useful exercise, and I think everyone left feeling like the time was well spent.
Anything else? No. Okay. I just had a couple of things. You should have all received an invitation to Cocktails and the Cattails at Aldo Leopold on the 30th. They are honoring Monona along with Pleasant Rowland and the Leopold family as the three kind of most influential pieces of their beginning. This is their 25th year anniversary. So we are only allowed a limited number of invitations. So if you could be sure to RSVP by the 27th, that would be great. Brian and I had a meeting with Madison Mayor Satcha Rhodes Conway and her vice mayor, her deputy mayor, on Friday. That was good. She reached out to us and came to Monona, which was pretty impressive, I thought. And so we talked about some concerns of mutual interest, and I think we plan to keep that conversation going. The only other thing I have is I forwarded the email about the parade in case you hadn't received it, but please plan on being there by about 9 on Monday morning, and we'll all have a good time. So there are 2 appointments on the agenda.
Before we do that, there was one other thing
that
I'm surprised you didn't announce. That Wednesday night, 6 o'clock in the
Oh.
library, Story Jam 2, starring the mayor, Mary O'Connor, and Leah Kimmel, and I'm not sure.
Joan.
And Joan.
Oh, nice.
So, sorry, I left.
Thank you so much.
Star of the show.
And several other people as well.
I've heard it should be pretty good.
I've heard it was good last time. So. Okay, 2 appointments. Ryan Kelly to the Board of Review, first alternate, and Luke Dorsweiler to the Board of Review, second alternate. Is there a motion to approve those?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointments are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.